Have you ever hit a moment in life where you looked around and thought, wait, how did I end up here? Maybe you started with passion, with fire, with purpose, and then somewhere along the road, you got lost. Your dream turned into routine. Your joy turned into pressure. Your talent turned into expectation. If that sounds familiar, you're about to hear a story that will hit you right where you live. Because this isn't a story about coffee. It's a story about identity, about losing who you were, and fighting like hell to get it back. This is the story of Starbucks, and how it nearly died, and then came back stronger than ever. And if you listen closely, it may help you rebuild something in your own life too. So let's begin. Imagine this. It's 2007. Starbucks is everywhere. More than 13,000 stores worldwide, billions in revenue, Wall Street celebrating, the world obsessed. It looks perfect from the outside, but on the inside, something is very wrong. The coffee tastes the same, the stores feel the same, the soul is fading. And Howard Schultz, the man who built Starbucks from 11 stores to a global phenomenon, knows it. Even though he's not CEO anymore, Schultz walks into Starbucks stores and smells something awful. Burnt cheese, not coffee. Burnt cheese from breakfast sandwiches that were never supposed to exist. And that smell becomes a symbol, a sign that Starbucks has lost its identity. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of blaming economics, instead of blaming employees, instead of blaming the world, Schultz blames success. Because sometimes, the moment you make it is the moment you start to fall apart. Success can make you sloppy, comfortable, distracted, disconnected from the reason you started. And Starbucks was falling right into that trap. Stores were opening too fast. Experience was turning into efficiency. Craft was turning into automation. The espresso machines were too tall, blocking the barista from the customer, destroying the human connection that made Starbucks magical in the first place. It wasn't a coffee shop anymore. It was a machine. And Schultz could feel it slipping away. So he wrote a memo, a private memo to Starbucks leadership. He called it the commoditization of the Starbucks experience. And inside that memo, he made a confession. Starbucks had lost its soul. He wasn't trying to start drama. He wasn't trying to look like a hero. He was trying to save something he loved. But that memo leaked. It crashed into the national news. The stock plummeted. Critics mocked him. Some said he had lost his mind. But sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. And that memo, that moment of raw honesty, became the beginning of a revolution. Now pause with that thought. Have you ever had a moment where you knew something was broken in your life, but telling the truth felt terrifying? Maybe it was, I hate this job. I'm not happy in this relationship. I'm pretending everything is fine. Sometimes the moment you say it out loud is the moment everything starts to change. That's exactly what happened at Starbucks. Because 1 year later, 2008, the financial crisis hits. The economy collapses. Customers vanish. Starbucks stock crashes. Competitors rise, and the company hits rock bottom. Not just financially, emotionally. Howard Schultz is watching the company he built fall apart, and he cannot sit still anymore. He steps back into the CEO role. He's older now, wiser, more scared, more determined. And before announcing his return to the board, he cries. Not from weakness, from love. Because he knew something most leaders forget. Saving a company is never just a business decision. It's a human one. And when Schultz returned, he didn't promise miracles. He didn't promise fast results. He didn't promise easy wins. He made one simple promise. Starbucks would rediscover its soul. And this is where the story turns. Because coming back from failure isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering who you are. And for you listening right now, maybe that's what you're here for. Not to become someone new, but to find the person you've always been. Because when everything falls apart, the question isn't, what did you lose? The question is, what will you rebuild? And trust me, what happens next in this story is going to blow your mind. When Howard Schultz returned as CEO, the world expected a turnaround plan, a strategy, a financial roadmap, a list of fixes. But instead, Schultz began with something radical. He asked everyone a question that most leaders never ask, a question we rarely ask ourselves. Why do we exist? Not, how do we make more money? Not, how do we beat the competition? But, why does Starbucks exist in the first place? And the answer wasn't business. It wasn't profits. It wasn't speed or scale or efficiency. It was people. Schultz told his teams, "We are not in the coffee business serving people. We are in the people business serving coffee." And if you've ever worked somewhere that forgot what it stood for, or been in a relationship that forgot what it once was, that line hits hard. Because losing your purpose doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small steps. Starbucks didn't collapse because of one huge mistake. It collapsed because of thousands of tiny ones. Tiny compromises, tiny shortcuts, tiny losses of intention. Just like life. Now here's where it gets wild. Schultz's first major move wasn't to launch something new, it was to shut something down. In February 2008, he closed every single Starbucks in America, more than 7,000 stores, at the same time. Locked, dark, empty. People thought it was corporate suicide. The media exploded. Wall Street panicked. Customers were stunned. Why shut down an entire empire during a financial crisis? Why risk millions of dollars in lost revenue? Simple. To retrain baristas on how to make a perfect espresso. Just espresso. Just craft. Just pride. Schultz wanted every partner to feel something they hadn't felt in years: ownership. That shutdown cost the company $6 million in a single day, but what it gave back was priceless. Identity. Think about that for a second. When your life feels off track, what's the first thing you do? Add more? Try harder? Work faster? Push harder? What if the real answer is to stop, to pause, to reset? Sometimes growth isn't about addition, it's about subtraction. Now, there's a moment in Schultz's journey that proves leadership isn't just strategy, it's emotion. Because right after the shutdown, Starbucks had to make brutal decisions. Thousands of people were laid off. 600 stores were closed. And Schultz didn't outsource that pain. He didn't hide behind email or HR forms. He took responsibility. He signed every layoff letter himself. Every one. He describes sitting alone in his office, tears dripping onto the pages. Because leadership isn't about power. It's about accountability. And sometimes, the hardest person to face is yourself. Now, here's something you might relate to. When Schultz began the turnaround, people expected fast results, instant improvement, immediate success. But the truth? It got worse first. The stock kept falling. The economy kept collapsing. Competitors grew stronger, and the world was laughing at Starbucks. It looked like Schultz had failed. And maybe you've been there too. When you try to fix something important, your health, your finances, your relationships,
There's almost always a phase where it gets harder before it gets better. It's the price of transformation. And just when you start doubting yourself, just when you start thinking you made the wrong decision, just when the world starts telling you to quit, that's usually the moment right before everything changes. And Starbucks was about to hit that moment. Because after the shutdown, after the layoffs, after the public humiliation, Schultz launched something nobody saw coming. A product idea that experts said would destroy the brand. Instant coffee. Think about that. Starbucks, the premium coffee company, selling instant coffee. Everyone said it was insane. Everyone said it would fail. Everyone said it would cheapen the Starbucks name. But Schultz didn't care. Because real success never comes from trying to impress the crowd. It comes from believing in the unseen, from betting on the long term, from trusting the vision. And this one idea, Starbucks Via, would change everything. Not because it was risky, not because it was profitable, but because it reminded the company to innovate instead of defend. It became a billion-dollar success. And here's the lesson you can't ignore. If you don't disrupt what you've built, someone else will. If you don't evolve as a person, life will force you to. If you don't risk something, you risk everything. But here's where the story becomes unforgettable. Because success wasn't the turning point. Service was.
By late 2008, Starbucks had survived the shutdown. It had survived layoffs. It had survived humiliation. And it had reconnected with its purpose. But something was still missing. Something deeper. Schultz knew the only way to truly rebuild Starbucks was to rebuild belief. Not just in coffee, not just in the brand, but in each other. And that's when he made the most surprising decision of all, one that had nothing to do with finance, strategy, or product. He called for a gathering, a massive one. He invited over 10,000 Starbucks store managers from across America to meet in New Orleans. Now think about that. 10,000 people, all in one city, all at one time, in the middle of a recession. Wall Street thought it was a joke. Analysts said it was wasteful. Critics mocked the idea. But Schultz wasn't planning a business meeting. He was planning a resurrection. When these managers arrived, they didn't sit in hotel conference rooms learning how to sell coffee. They were sent out into the streets. New Orleans was still shattered from Hurricane Katrina. Homes were destroyed. Families were broken. Community spaces were gone. And for 3 days, Starbucks managers put down their pens and picked up paintbrushes. They rebuilt playgrounds, restored parks, cleaned neighborhoods, painted walls. 50,000 hours of community service in 3 days. And here's the beautiful part. The managers didn't just rebuild New Orleans. New Orleans rebuilt them. Schultz said the most powerful moment happened when everyone was covered in mud, sweat, and paint. No suits, no titles, no corporate walls. Just people united by purpose. One manager later said, "Something inside me woke up. I didn't just manage a coffee shop. I mattered." And suddenly, Starbucks wasn't just a company again. It was a movement. This is the moment in the story, the exact moment,
When Starbucks stopped trying to survive and started to believe. And if you've ever lost yourself, lost confidence, lost direction, you know that belief is the hardest thing to rebuild. Because belief requires proof. Proof that effort matters. Proof that progress is possible. Proof that we're not alone. And that's exactly what Schultz gave his people. But wait till you hear this. When the managers returned from New Orleans, something had changed. The culture, the energy, the collective heartbeat of Starbucks. The company wasn't just preparing drinks anymore. It was preparing experiences. They focused on the sound of steaming milk, the smell of fresh beans, the warmth of real human conversation. The coffee didn't just taste better, it felt better. Because the store managers now understood something priceless. They weren't selling coffee. They were giving people a place to belong. And here's where the story gets real for you. Everyone has a New Orleans moment. A moment where life hands you mud. A moment where you feel alone. A moment where you think you're barely holding it together. But what if that moment isn't the end? What if that moment is the rebuild? What if the mud is where strength forms? What if the struggle is where connection happens? What if the setback is preparing you for the comeback? There's a powerful truth hidden in this chapter of Starbucks history, a truth Schultz eventually said out loud. Winning at business is far easier than winning at life. Because business problems are technical, life problems are emotional. Business problems are logical, life problems are spiritual. Business problems require plans. Life problems require courage. And Schultz had finally found the courage to lead with heart, not ego. Now, what happened next changed Starbucks forever. The company began innovating like a startup again. They launched mobile payments, My Starbucks Idea, crowdsourcing customer feedback, loyalty rewards, new store designs, sustainable sourcing initiatives. And here's the twist. Many of these ideas weren't new. They were ideas Starbucks had been ignoring for years. Because when you're trying to be big, you stop listening to voices that sound small. But those small voices, customers, baristas, store managers, became the company's greatest strength. This wasn't luck. This wasn't timing. This wasn't fate. It was humility. Schultz realized something most leaders never understand. The answers don't live in the boardroom. They live in the break room. They live on the front lines. They live in the real world. And once Starbucks started listening, really listening, the entire company shifted. Sales climbed, customer loyalty grew, the stock recovered, and Starbucks became one of the most admired brands in the world again. But the most important change wasn't financial. It was spiritual. Starbucks had found its soul. And now, we arrive at the moment that will change how you see success forever.
So now the Starbucks comeback is in motion. The culture is reborn. The purpose is clear. The soul is restored. And yet, Howard Schultz still felt unfinished. Because a comeback isn't complete when the numbers rise. A comeback is complete when the identity returns. And Starbucks was still learning who it truly was. Here's the twist most people don't know. The company's biggest breakthroughs didn't come from technology or marketing. They came from something much quieter, much older, much harder. Values. Real values. spoken out loud, lived in real time. Schultz pushed the company to rediscover one question: what do we stand for? And the answer wasn't money. It wasn't expansion. It wasn't competition. It was connection. Connection with customers. Connection with partners. Connection with communities. The line Schultz repeated over and over was this: we are not in the coffee business serving people. We are in the people business serving coffee. Do you see the difference? That one sentence changed how Starbucks treated employees, customers, suppliers, ideas, mistakes, and success. Because once you shift from transactions to relationships, everything becomes personal. And when something becomes personal, it becomes powerful. But here's where it gets even more real. Howard Schultz was terrified. He admits it in the book. He was scared almost every day. Scared he would fail. Scared investors would revolt. Scared employees would quit. Scared customers wouldn't return. Most leaders hide fear. Schultz shared his. And by doing that, he gave everyone else permission to stop pretending. No more corporate masks. No more empty language. No more robotic smiles. Finally, there was honesty. And honesty created trust. And trust created momentum. Let's talk about what success looked like after that. It didn't look like fast expansion, flashy numbers, wild profits. It looked like pride, quality, consistency, loyalty, humanity. And slowly, almost quietly, the company that was falling apart became stronger than ever. Here's the proof. By 2010, Starbucks had returned to record-breaking profitability. The stock price soared. Investors rejoiced. Analysts apologized. But the celebration wasn't about numbers. It was about meaning. The victory wasn't that Starbucks survived. The victory was that Starbucks survived without selling its soul. Think about that. Most companies that nearly die come back as something different. Smaller, colder, more mechanical, more efficient, but less alive. Starbucks did the opposite. It came back more human, more emotional, more intentional, more connected, more itself. And that's why this story hits so hard. Because Starbucks isn't just a company comeback story. It's a personal comeback story. It's the story of losing yourself, losing direction, losing passion, losing identity, then rediscovering it from the inside out. And if you've ever lost yourself, you know it's not the return that's hard. It's facing the mirror. The Starbucks story teaches us something life-changing. You don't rebuild by asking, how do I grow? You rebuild by asking, who am I? Growth is a byproduct of identity, and identity is a byproduct of honesty, and honesty requires courage. And that's the real secret. Howard Schultz wasn't brave because he knew what to do. He was brave because he didn't, and he still showed up. That's leadership. That's resilience. That's transformation. And here's the big question for you. Where are you growing at the cost of your soul? Where are you chasing the numbers, the approval, the comfort, the validation? Where are you moving so fast that you stop smelling the coffee? Maybe your relationships lost connection. Maybe your goals lost purpose. Maybe your life lost spark. But here's the good news. Nothing is too far gone to recover. Not companies, not dreams, not identities. Your future is not defined by how big you become. It's defined by how deeply you reconnect with yourself, with others, with purpose. And that leads us to one final truth. Success is not a destination. Success is a direction. Forward, onward. One choice at a time, one step at a time, one moment at a time. Just like Schultz said, the only number that matters is one. One customer, one connection, one act of courage, one decision to begin. So if this story hit you, don't rush back into your day. Pause. Ask yourself, what am I building? And is it worth who I'm becoming? Because your comeback isn't someday. It isn't later. It isn't when conditions improve. It begins the moment you choose it, right now. If this spoke to your soul, don't just scroll away. Hit subscribe and start building your comeback with heart.